This video is from my series that walks you through how to build a career in film and television production. Industry, we talked about it last week. It's features, it's TV, it's indie film, it's reality, it's commercial, right? So it's sort of broken into two categories, which is feature film and television. So we'll talk about feature first, and we'll come back and circle back with television. And as I said to you before, there really are dramatically different networking cycles and people who work in them. Although it's less that way now than it has been in the history of entertainment, for sure. Feature is essentially domestic and it's foreign or international. Those are the two areas where you can connect and make a sale. Domestic is all the places that you know, that you work with, you hear about them all the time, you see them all the time. International is essentially at the festivals, and you connect with those people. There was a time when you could sell a title into international television or international film, and then come back to the U.S. And make a sale domestically. That's less common now. It was very common in the 90s. You saw a lot of Lou Diamond Phillips in that cycle. Tons of those movies. That's how they got made. Remember Tremors? That was one of those. It got made overseas it got financed overseas first and then sold into the U.S. Television, it's essentially broadcast, it's cable, it's OTT. Syndication, syndication is what you watch in a local affiliate that was made 100 years ago, and they're just playing it back, like old episodes of MASH and stuff like that. It's pretty much non-existent. Feature film is essentially tentpole and award films. There's nothing in between. The dramatic features from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that used to exist, they just don't get made, at least for features. Romantic comedies don't really get made. That might change, and features may just go away in large part compared to what the business has been. It's very strange. Who the fuck knows what's going to happen? I don't think it's going to go away, but I do think it'll be less. There's fewer movies made over the past, 20 years. We went from having 9 places to sell movies to 5 places. It used to be there were all the studios, and then there were mini majors within each studio. Each studio made 20 to 35 movies every year, and the mini majors made anywhere from 5 or 6 to 12. Now there's 5 places, 5 studios, a couple of small market distributors, and it's just a different animal. There's not a lot of movies being made anymore, and partially because it's just harder to make money doing it. And so all the studios each are making fewer of those movies. In the feature world, this is specific to how we're selling into that market, right? There are essentially a few different players in the feature world. I should be more specific. So there are producers who are essentially in the business of development, physical production, post-production. And then there's distributor. A distributor is the person who takes a finished movie and then they distribute it out to all the different formats, whether it's internationally and domestic, whether it's feature film in theaters, onto home video, onto the OTTs, whatever the format is, and then ultimately onto broadcast, whether it's on an airplane or it's broadcast or cable or wherever. Distribution's job is to take those movies that production and development created and sell them everywhere and make as much money as they possibly can. They do it foreign and domestic. Then there's exhibition. Exhibition are theaters. It's theaters, it's broadcast, it's streaming. That's essentially how the feature cycle works, right? What we care about is the producer development and to some extent physical production part of it. Everything else happens by a whole different group of thousands of people who make all that shit happen. We don't care about distribution. We don't care about exhibition. We only ultimately care whether or not a movie will get exhibited so that people will see your work. The trends, futures, fewer of them. Streaming is really competing. It's not competing. It's pretty much taking over. Shrinking ticket sales on screens. That's been the trend. The money's been up. In other words, last year we might have sold 5 billion, although it's different. It's more like 11 or 9. And then this year we sold, in a normal year, we might have sold $7 billion worth of tickets, but the number of tickets sold has gone down, and it's been going down pretty consistently for a decade or two. You might have an anomalous year where you sell more tickets, but the reality is fewer people are going to the theater than they used to. Production budgets are going up pretty consistently, although I don't think that's going to be the case after COVID. I think production budgets are going to come way down. I don't think
Yeah.
you're going to see $500 and $200 million movies anymore. Those will go the way of the dodo bird. They may come back up, but I don't see that being the case. Everything is becoming more vertically integrated because there was a consent decree that got changed. So you can own a producer, a distributor, and an exhibitor all within the same company. And that probably will be manifest itself in the form of Netflix and or Amazon buying up these assets in the next, I would probably say 12 to 18 months, maybe even less, depending on how cheap they are. And I do think the trend is going to be more toward direct to consumer. And then in television, I mean, television is wide open. It used to just be dramatic. You either did hour drama or you did sitcoms. That's all there was. And then there was the daytime chat shows, which was really syndication. There were soap operas. There were the news programs. There were what was called right before prime time. I think it was prime access. I can't remember the day part, but there was a period of time for about a half an hour, and that was like Entertainment Tonight and those kinds of programs, right? Which now was TMZ for a while. But this has all changed because of the streamers. You don't necessarily, and the other thing was you either made 9 episodes or you made 26 episodes. If you made 9, it's because the network bought 9 episodes and then they canceled it if it didn't work. If you made 26, that was a traditional series, or that was a traditional season of one series. That's not the case anymore. You might see 10 episodes, you might see 6, you might see short form, you might see a half-hour show. The other thing is half hours ran 20 minutes and hours ran 40 minutes. And 20 years ago, they used to run 22 minutes and 47 minutes. Not anymore. Now there's 20 minutes of commercials in practically both of them. So it's all changed because the streamers don't really give a shit. They're not bound by these half-hour segments you have to sell advertising on. What they care about is the people who are paying $18 every month. Huge growth, new outlets, big scale. Disney Plus is going to scale up their operation. They basically took back catalog, they made Mandalorian, and they put everything else into the Disney Plus and started selling it to, whatever, 100 million households. Or I think it's 120 million in the US now. But that's going to change. Disney Plus, in order to compete with Amazon and Netflix, has to figure out how to develop, make, and put content. And it is truly content. It's not movies. It's not TV shows. They're making content. They're making minutes. I used to say that about Disney even in the old days. They're not really in the feature business. They're in the minutes business. But anyway, they are figuring out how to do this at scale. So the number of people in development who will do the job to sift through all the material to find stuff to percolate up to get into a green light, that will expand as NBC, Universal, Warner Brothers, HBO, those kinds of formats, as they're coming out with their own, and Viacom will have its own here soon with the CBS stuff, I would say in probably the next 24 months. But all of these outlets are expanding their development apparatuses, finding material and greenlighting them. It used to be one guy. The last 2 were Semmel and Daly. They were the 2 dudes at Warner Brothers who were basically the greenlight gods. And they went into the digital world. Well, Terry Semmel went to Yahoo, and Daly, I think, wound up retiring after that, after their run at Warner's. But that was in the early part of the aughts. And now you have Netflix that has 15 different people who can greenlight movies or shows, TV, and around the world, who can greenlight without anybody above them approving it. They have a budget. They've got to deliver this many minutes of programming, and it has to succeed. It has to do a number. People have to watch it. But there's a lot of different places to sell to, and the choke points are going away if they haven't already gone away. So there's lots of opportunity here, and there's lots of scale happening. The downside is margins are a lot lower. Producers' fees, directors and writer fees are pretty much bound by the guild agreement, and you can't pay less than scale. And scale it's good money. I mean, directors make, the director can make anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 an episode. Some cases smaller. Writer for a 2-hour movie's $40,000, $50,000 for an hour. It's like $25,000. So, per draft, plus you might make weekly fees on top of that. So just depending on how your deal is structured. So the fees in for writers and directors are not going down so much, although producers are trying to find a way to work around those guilds. I see it every day, and they're working outside the US. So they're hiring directors and writers and people from outside the US, although it hasn't picked up speed. I see it very infrequently. At any rate, margins are lower, fees are smaller. In television, the structure is essentially a producer is a studio, it's an OTT, and it's structured with development, post, and production, just like feature is. It's identical. The process is the same, it's just shorter form. And then their next, their ultimate outlet is exhibition. So the studios, with the exception of Sony, own, for the most part, own a broadcast network, and they own a bunch of cable networks. They don't own the pipes in the ground, but they own the networks that go through the pipes. They don't own an OTT yet, although in the traditional sense of it, meaning Hulu, Netflix, and Amazon original programming, but they are obviously Disney Plus changed that. The new Peacock thing that's out, and then Warner Brothers HBO Max is the next one, and then after that comes CBS, and God knows what happens after that. But nonetheless, they have successfully eliminated the distributor in that vertical integration of television, where it used to be a big part of it. One thing, well, let me go back to exhibition. Let me finish exhibition, I should say. Exhibition is broadcast, cable, and streaming. They're all vertically integrated. They own a whole bunch of it, except the pipes that are in the ground. Like I said, syndication is the other piece of it, which we talked about a little. It's almost non-existent. It used to be a huge business. In fact, the Oprah Winfrey Show and Donahue and those kinds of shows were syndication shows. And that's how Oprah and Phil Donahue made billions of dollars for themselves. Not anymore. Everybody works for Wendy Williams is a good example of that. Doesn't own her programming. She's basically a hired gun. Same with Samantha Bee. She's essentially a hired gun. So syndication is pretty much gone away. Trend is there's going to be tons more programming, and it's going to be high growth. Streaming's taken over, and it's only going to get bigger. Talent used to want to do features, and they would do some television if they felt like they were bottom dwelling. Now they all want deals at OTT or they want a deal at HBO. Development, as I said, has become a lot more diffuse, and there's a lot more of those jobs. And same with the production approvals. You don't have to stovepipe through one man or woman. And then production budgets are going up in television, which is actually kind of surprising. But when you think about how many billions of dollars they're spending, it kind of makes sense. So anyway, that's television, that's feature, that's kind of how it's laid out. What sits above all that, I wanted to make one comment about those three television and features, which is there are, it's typically defined by either a studio or a producer and exhibition, and then in some cases with distribution stuck in between them. It is not uncommon, in fact, it's more common than not, for a producer to be a distributor and now an exhibitor all simultaneously. Or they could be one of those things and not the other, right? So all the studios are, they're producers and they're distributors, and in some cases they're exhibitors, like Disney, Disney Plus, ABC, and then their Disney television distribution mechanism or apparatus that sells all their shows around the world. So they can be all of those things or just one of those things and everything in between. And that's a summary of features in TV. Our goal in this program is to identify the producers and sell to them and network with all levels of people who you want to work with on the shows you want to work with. And that's what we will focus on going forward.